So when I'm coloring up, say, something like this barn, this goofy barn, first thing I'm always going to do is determine where my light source is coming from, alright? I'm going to go from this left side always. The important thing to understand is that surfaces, when it comes to color, yeah, we see a tabletop, it looks red or it looks brown, but it's usually kind of a spectrum of colors. It's kind of everything that's being reflected around it, you know, and I call it color rainbow. So I layer color in a very similar way, because I want it way more interesting than just, you know, making the barn purely red or making the sky purely blue. I want to work a few more colors. I want to build more depth into the drawing. And the last thing I want to do in terms of changing value is necessarily just grabbing the black. Renaissance painters, I'm going to chisel my point, they would constantly, to create brightness in a drawing, they would add a little bit of yellow underneath everything. And I'm going to do that for this drawing. You don't have to. Sometimes you want a drawing that's a little bit cooler, so you may not do this. But I'm darkening this surface here. It's probably going to be hard to tell on the screen, because that's where the light's furthest away. There's going to be a darker surface there. The light's hitting on this one here. There'll be like a little shadow up underneath here. But I'm doing a quick 45 of just some yellow, kind of mapping where my values would be. The majority of the light's going to hit on this side, so I'm going to darken the right side of that silo. These are background trees. I'm going to put a layer of yellow on there. I'm not pressing real hard, super lights. And then on the ground plane, I'm going to have some yellow. Ground plane is the one place where I switch up my stroke a little bit. I'm kind of following the topography. And even across the walk, I switch up my stroke on this ground plane. I do more of a horizontal sort of stroke across there. And I'm going to put some yellow into the tree. Alright, across the roof. That's really light. It's starting to map my values. Now I'm going to start to put I'm considering the hues into the drawing to reinforce certain things. And I want kind of a red barn, typical red barn, green trees and a blue sky for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and go in with my red. I'm going to go darker up into these corners. I'm staying at the same 45. A little bit lighter back up, pushing again darker. Now this face I'm going right across it, but I'm keeping lighter. I want this face to be lighter. That's where more sun's hitting. But I've got my red out already. I might as well touch the other surfaces real quick. Put a little bit of red into my silo back here. I'll eventually, you know, make this maybe more neutralized. But doesn't hurt to put a little bit of red into it. Background trees too, they're going to be green eventually, but to put a little red in there, that complementary color is going to make the green greener when all is said and done. And a little bit of red into my tree up here. Not getting crazy. I'm going to reinforce this on the barn just a little bit, and a little bit on the ground then. Keep it as consistent. I'm going to come down the trunk with it in the darker shadow of the tree up here. Just a little punch of red in there. Since I used red on the barn here, I want to make that red. I want to neutralize it, but to keep it intense in a way. So I'm going to add a little bit of green to that, and it's going to kind of neutralize it, make it feel a little browner. Same thing here. Pull a little bit of green through the face, and then since I got the green out, I'm going to hit a little bit of green into the silo, and now I can really put it back into those background trees. And I'm using just what is this, an apple green, so it's kind of got a higher chroma. It's not real dark. I can really start to establish the green in the background trees, and in the overhead tree darker into the shadow up underneath the tree, and then into the ground. Again, I kind of work with the topography. Kind of a curved walk there. Hit the face. This is going to be a little bit darker back here. I'm going to throw a little more green in here. I like where there's a darker, kind of a cavernous area, I like to layer a lot of color so it has depth. If I just color this area here black, it flattens out the whole drawing. So I layer color in, put a little bit of green into the tree there. Now we can start to layer in maybe some blue. Blue, for the most part, it's in the sky, right? But first I'm going to put some into the barn here. I'm just going to layer a couple strokes of blue into these darker areas, especially these interior parts of the barn. Now I can really start to neutralize the silo here. It's going to reflect some sky and everything, so I can all those colors coming together. I'm going to go darker to this one side. And I'm going to bring some of the sky into the horizon here underneath these trees. Up underneath there. Bring it down the trunk. The trunk's going to be darker, so putting a little more blue into it is nice. And then the roof, it's always going to reflect some sky, so I might as well hit it with a little bit of blue. Definitely into those areas. The ground plane always reflects a little bit of sky. So I hit the walk with a little bit of blue, and while I've got it out, let's start it with the sky. I'm just going to put kind of a wash of blue through the sky. And when I lay this down, I let it overlap the edges of the shape that I'm coloring in. I'm going to put a little more, since we have light hitting on this face now, that we've kind of reinforced this as darker, I'm going to hit this a little bit of yellow just to have that glow a little bit more, let us know light's hitting there. And I'm even going to hit this edge here a little bit of yellow. I'm going to go to a little bit of a darker green. This is an olive. I used an apple before. I'm going to darken up underneath the trees. There's a little bit of shadow underneath these trees here. Up underneath this tree up here. Just a hair. So now we're using a value in a monochromatic way. Since I have it out, I'll put a little more intensity down the trunk. Even though our trunk isn't going to be green, it's probably going to be more of a brownish color when we're all said and done. I'll add more red to it in a minute. Touch the silo. Now I'm going to put a little more intensity of the darkness of this color up against the barn just to pop it. This change in value up against the barn just to pop it using that darker olive. Let me put a little more in the top part of the tree, a little bit more yellow. That's where light's hitting. I'm going to go back to my blue. I've got kind of yellow in the tree. I've got some green. I got a little bit of red to make the green greener. But I want to pop this face out. So I'm going to bring some of that blue back. And I'm going to intensify this change in value using that analogous scheme. A little bit darker towards the barn. Same thing here. Using blue. Using analogous. Get that blue up underneath there in the shadow again. So it feels a little bit, has a little more depth to it. I'm going to reinforce this tree trunk. I'm adding some red to it now. Everything should kind of brown up for me a little bit. A little bit darker to the right side. A little bit darker in here. Now, a color I like to use for shadows and darker areas in a drawing is just an indigo blue. If I grab black, everything flattens again, alright? So I'm going to rough in some shadows. My light source is coming from here. I've got a shadow up underneath this thing here. Let's see here. I'm just going to follow it along. First I'm going to hit the eave. I'm going to hit this with a little bit of indigo up underneath there. What is that? The soffit. Alright, now the shadow, I can create this, I can make this face feel, yet it's further away from the light by adding a little bit of indigo. Maybe create a little bit of a shadow up underneath this eave here. Just to pop this edge a little bit. Again, my light's hitting more on this face. I'm going to just draw a line. Boom, there. Kind of there. And darker to the right side. Less light hits towards the bottom of the silo, so I can get a little bit darker towards the bottom of the silo also. Keeping the same stroke for the most part. Reinforce that edge there. Now I really push some of this indigo into the dark part of the tree. Now push hard. Do little shadows up underneath the tree. Shadow coming off the silo. Shadow up underneath the tree here. In the background. Imply a little bit of a shadow on the ground plane for the barn. Doing this all with indigo. This is the thing that kind of pops everything real quick. Shadow for this, whoa, for this tree kind of coming across. like that. Let's do a dark shadow right at the top of the trunk, darken up these limbs. Maybe I'll add a couple limbs. I'm going to go a little bit darker down this side of the trunk. Up underneath the trees here. Dark shadow at the top of their background trunks. Shadow up underneath them. Nice dark shadow underneath this overstory tree. And then pull some of that darkness to the right side of it. Reinforce this a little bit. So I put some of the shadows in, now it's starting to pop. I'll reinforce a few colors. I'll bring some more red down the face of this. I'll put a little more red in here. But you see, it's all about layering color. If you just put one bland color down at a time, I guess if that's what you're looking for, then you'll accomplish it. Here, I can change. Blue. I'm going to add a little more yellow, reflect a little more. The sky's pretty boring right now. Just a hint, since the sky is blue, to make the blue bluer. A hint of orange in there. If you want to intensify some of your darks a little bit, you can bring in a little bit of black. A guy named Mike Lynn coined all these terms: color earthy, color pear. A really talented guy that I learned how to draw from. So you can add, if you want a little more intensity, but you can't overdo this, otherwise it will just flatten the drawing too much. But you can bring a little bit of your black into the drawing. And I'm going to reinforce some of these edges here. And it's just enough color to tell the story, overlapping, making it interesting. I'm using a little roller bar. Get them to pop a little bit more. But you want to stay light with your Prisma so you can overlap and blend colors into it. If you press too hard, too quick, it gets real waxy on you. Reinforce this goofy walk. A couple pieces of grasses in there. Show a couple more strokes across the path. A little more intense sky. And there you go, really basic color theory and how to apply Prismacolor pencil. Start light, keep your texture consistent. Don't push too hard so that you can blend color. Incorporate a little bit of color next, a little bit of color pear, a little red in your green, a little orange in your